And I know that you have divided up what you regard as the key findings of the study. There's a division of labor here. So without further ado, I'd like you to present each of your sections, and then perhaps we will have time afterward for a brief exchange. And we're going to begin with Rana Adib. She is Executive Secretary of REN21, and it is a global public-private multi-stakeholder network on renewable energy that's headquartered at the United Nations Environment Program in Paris, France. And she will be followed straight away by Diala Hawila. She is Associate Program Officer in the Policy Unit of IRENA, working on topics related to policy assessment and focusing, amongst others, on renewable energy auctions. And then finally, we will hear from the man in the middle, Paolo Frankl, who is head of the Renewable Energy Division at the IAEA, and he provides policy advice in the areas of technology, markets, and system integration. So, Rana Adib, please begin.
Well, to be honest, unfortunately, maybe for here, or fortunately, actually, we have changed orders. So we just wanted to test, basically, the spontaneity of our audience. So okay. Diala is going to start. Sorry for that.
I'm sorry. That did not...
Shall we go there for the presentation?
Yeah.
Okay. Please have the presentation. Okay. That's fine. Good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Diala. I'm from the International Renewable Energy Agency. I am very happy and honored to be here with you today to share this presentation with Ms. Rana and Paolo to present the findings of our report on renewable energy policies in a time of transition. This is the first time that three institutions come together to deliver messages on policy recommendations on how to further deploy renewable energy and to advance the energy transition globally. So far, we have presented the findings of the report in major events such as the G20 and IRENA's assembly in January. And through those presentations, we have received very valuable feedback, and also we have had more than 1,000 reviewers for our reports, many of which are here today. Thank you very much for your feedback. In this report, we look at policies in the power sector, in heating and cooling, and in transport. We look at measures in order to integrate variable renewable energy into the system. And we also propose a classification, an updated classification of renewable energy policies that places those policies in a broader context of other policies not only related to the energy sector itself. Renewable energy deployment has made major strides in the past decade, driven mainly by technological advancement, cost reductions, and of course, renewable energy policies. However, the progress has not been homogeneous across countries. In new developing markets, we still face barriers related to technology, to finance, to regulatory barriers. And in advanced markets with a large share of renewable energy, we are now facing challenges that are related to the integration of variable renewable energy. And this progress is also not homogeneous across sectors. And while we can see that the number of countries with targets and policies for renewable energy has been increasing in a staggering way, those policies mostly still focus on the power sector. So today, the presentation will focus on measures to enable system integration of variable renewable energy, and also on policies to advance renewable energy in sectors such as heating and cooling and transport that are the main consumers of energy globally. Before that, a few words on policies in the power sector. Today we see that the still most widely adopted policy is tax incentives and tax reductions, and this is because they can be applied to projects from all sizes and installations and in all contexts, especially the access context, as we saw previously in the session before. For those to be effective in the access context, they need to be, of course, coupled with regulatory policies, capacity measures, and finance access measures, and other also policies. Feed-in tariffs and premiums are the second most widely adopted policies, and they have played a major role in deploying renewables globally. One challenge associated with feed-in tariffs that are administratively set tariffs and premiums is that they need to be set in there's a challenge in setting the tariff and in adapting the tariff to reflect changing market conditions such as the falling cost of technologies, while at the same time providing a stable environment for investments. And this is why lately auctions have been increasingly adopted because of their ability to capture the real price of a technology in a specific context and also fulfill other policy objectives. So as mentioned, auctions have been able to reflect the falling costs of technologies between 2010 and 2016, specifically for onshore wind and solar PV. And we have seen lately record-breaking low prices and auctions in all regions of the world and all technologies. But it is very important to highlight the factors that are behind the prices that we are seeing, and that those prices are not necessarily replicable in any context. Those factors can be categorized in the country-specific factors, such as cost of land, labor, and resources, the investor's confidence, such as the off-taker's risk, other policies that can be also applied at the same time, such as, for example, tax incentives, and also the design of the auction. So because the auction can be designed in a way to account for trade-offs between the lowest price achieved and other objectives. It is very important to highlight that auctions are also associated with weaknesses, such as they could probably drive small players out of the market, or they could sometimes result in underbidding and delays if they are not designed appropriately. So this is why it is very important to highlight that the choice of policy is not always the same in any context. In some contexts, it is very context-specific to the technology, to the level of maturity of the sector. And also, it is important to highlight that the success of any policy heavily relies on its design. The design of auctions, as we mentioned, is not only for to have a low price at the end, but it can be designed to satisfy other objectives, such as socioeconomic development and also most recently system integration. And this is where I pass the floor to Paolo to talk about system integration and policies in the heating sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Diala. So this graph actually means entering in a new era. With solar PV and wind below 5 cents, this trend will continue. In many countries, the prices are already announced below 3 cents, in some also 2 cents. This is really changing the narrative, and system integration is becoming a priority in many countries. So a lot of discussion is deserved on that, and there is still a lot of confusion, because many countries think that this is a problem starting from the onset. This is absolutely not true. It's helpful to look at different phases, and the phases are according to 2 parameters. One is the share of penetration of renewables, of wind and solar in the mix, and the second is the flexibility of the rest of the system. So we distinguish 4 starting phases. The first, no impact at all. Why? Because the variability, the flexibility of the system copes with variability of demand, which is much, much higher than the variability of wind and solar, so absolutely no action to be taken. Second, you see a difference in the net load, so in the remaining load curve, minus the total minus wind and solar, but still the flexibility is abundant. And I'm oversimplifying here, but basically if you avoid some typical mistakes, below 10% of penetration, these are the 2 most important phases in the whole world. I have only a few countries listed here. I could add another 100 plus in phase 1, and this should be remembered. Then you have a number of countries which are above 10% of penetration. These typically are European countries, but also some US markets, where the flexibility becomes key. And I will come to flexibility again in a minute. And then you have only a very few countries with extremely high penetration rates, where also the short-term stability of the system becomes an issue. Ireland here is a special case because it's an island, is weakly interconnected to the United Kingdom, so it faces those kind of problems well before Denmark and Southern Australia. Now, the typical question is, how much is the share of renewables that I can integrate? And this really very much depends on flexibility, and flexibility has many sources. First point, from the left to the right. Also, renewables can serve more flexibly and serve ancillary system if we ask them to do it. If we apply the wrong standards, then there is no way. So system-friendly variable renewables first. Second, also dispatchable generation, which is by far the largest amount of flexibility today. There is a lot of flexibility in other renewables like hydro, bioenergy, but also gas, and even coal and nuclear can be operated more flexibly. Demand shaping, the demand side response is very often the cheapest way of flexibility, but there are no markets in many, with a few exceptions in the world. And then storage, there is a lot of discussion of storage, rightly so, but for the moment this is the most expensive option. I'm referring here to batteries. The progress in batteries is phenomenal. It will continue driven by electric vehicles, but please remind there are other flexibility options. And deliberately, grid and connectivity is here horizontal because it is a huge flexibility resource in itself, enlarging the balancing, but it's also the enabler of the other flexibility resources. Now, however, it's not about hardware. It's a lot also about software and the system operation and the market rules. And here I want to be blunt. The market rules that we have where there are energy markets were designed in another era for different purposes, and they are not necessarily fit for a high share of variable renewables in the system. They have to be redesigned. And by doing this, we can have a very cost-effective, very high share integration of renewables. I would like to stress that the system integration of variable renewables is not a technical issue. It is by far more an economic optimization issue. And the last point is about the whole architecture and the role and the responsibilities. We speak a lot about distribution generation. Who is responsible if there is a disruption at distribution level? Is it the DSO? Is the TSO? Are the suppliers? We need a set of new rules, and one important message of this report is that all this needs to be done in an integrated, holistic way. Now, from a very advanced topic to what we call the Cinderella of the renewable policies, which is heat. Heat, as you know, heating and cooling. Heating and cooling, as you know, is 50% of total final consumption, but there are many less renewable policies around the world, and there is much less expansion of renewables in the world on this. If you look, it's only 9% of modern renewables supplying renewable heat. 7% is direct use, and 2% is renewable electricity. We have good examples of leaders in the world, the Nordic countries, also Brazil, but there is a lot to be done. If you look at this map, which is very different from the one that Diala showed, the most of the map is gray, which means no policies at all. Then the other interventions are obligations, and only a few countries, mainly Europe, are using direct incentives for renewable heat. We have to transform this and to make the Cinderella into a princess. And for doing this, we think it's useful to look at four different situations, 4 policy clusters. One, the countries that have a strong, either existing or potential district heating system. This is the model of the Nordic countries. But the next country that could step in here to supply district heating and cooling with renewables instead of coal is China. The second is countries that have a heavy gas system, like my country, Italy, or the UK. The narrative here is completely different, and the first priority is to create a level playing field. The third point, regardless of the infrastructure, countries where there is a potential market for industrial applications. Industry is not just high temperature steel and cement making, but it's also low and medium temperature processes in the textile and the food industry with a lot of possibilities, and of course for automatic water. And the fourth, last but not least, it was mentioned so much in the previous parts, clean cooking and making sure that we have affordable products, and this should be a policy priority for all countries in the world, much more than it was today. And with this, I give the floor to Rana. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So after having heard the first energy end-use sector, we're coming to the second one, to transport. Oh. Sorry. Transport is so basically the second largest energy end-use sector. It represents 29% of total final energy consumption. And when we are looking into how renewable energies are being used in the sector, we're only at a share of 3.1%. So it's really a sector which is highly fossil fuel dependent. And as a result of this, it's also contributing to a very large extent to energy-related CO2 emissions. This really means that for a full decarbonization of the transport sector, but also of the energy sector, there is a need to have renewable energy deployed in the transport sector more than we currently have. As in other sectors, policies are key to do this. And when we are looking at the policy activities which took place, we really see that there is experience basically only in the biofuels policies, on the production, on the use and the distribution of biofuels. And this is something which is very important to do, but it's not enough. Which also means that today the approaches to really lead to the uptake of renewable energy in the transport sector need to be much, much broader. They need to look at the road transportation, at aviation, at shipping, and they do not only need to focus on biofuels solely. We see, for instance, electrification. What is needed here is integrated planning, integrated policy design, and there's really a need to look at the energy carriers and the fuels on one side, but also policy that focus on the development and the use and deployment of the vehicles which can use these renewable energy fuels, and also the distribution actually of these fuels. Another aspect which is really important is we do have a sector which is highly dependent on fossil fuel. And here it is very clear, to have a better enabling environment, I guess, there is really a need to phase out basically or address the fossil fuel subsidies, so remove the fossil fuel subsidies. And yesterday there was a session on carbon pricing too, so carbon pricing can be an essential element to address this too. Now, when we're coming to, so we have heard basically in all sectors that we're entering another era because the economic situation is a different one, because there is really a need to have a much broader integrated approach. And this is something which needs to be reflected also in the policy classifications. What we see today, in the past, policies were focusing very much on direct policies, direct supporting policies. Today there is a need to have more integrated policies focusing on the enabling environment, the need to have integration with other sector policies, and also to put the policy framework into the enabling, into the broader socio-economic system. I'm not going into detail here. We do have this in the full, the classification. You will have the opportunity to look at it in the full report. Now, what is the conclusion overall, I guess, of this work of the three organizations? Apart of the fact that this is really the first report where the three major organizations working on renewable energy are working together, and I do think this is really also something important to mention. It means that we agree on the fact that policies are key. It also means that we agree on fundamental principle that we need to move the policy development to a much broader approach and integrate energy policies and develop them not in an isolated way, but in a broader context. This is already one message. The other one is obviously that what we mentioned, we are looking into the other sectors. If we are serious about reaching the decarbonization, reaching sustainable development goals, we cannot only have a focus on the power sector. We need to address transport, we need to address heating and cooling, we heard about energy access, and we also need to look into the regions where the renewable uptake is slower than in regions where we really see huge successes of renewable energy. It is very clear that there is not one sole instrument policy which can be and lead to the success everywhere. So policy design and policies need to be country specific and need to take into account the socio-economic context, the particularities. And again, I'm highlighting this again, but there is a need to break out of our energy silo and to speak with players out of other sectors. This might not always be so easy because it means we have different mandates, it means we have different understanding, we need to bridge and create a dialogue, but it is fundamental if we are serious about renewable energy uptake and the transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Awesome.